hadn't taken a road trip in years. Between work, family, and the slow creep of routine, my wife and I had let the world shrink around us. Our days became loops of traffic, emails, and fast food dinners eaten in front of the TV. We needed a break, something to remind us of the joy we once shared. That's why we planned the trip. Just us. No kids. No friends. No GPS. We were going to recreate a route we'd taken over a decade earlier, our honeymoon road trip through the Smoky Mountains. The same twisting back roads. The same mountain tunnels. The same late-night roadside diners that served watery coffee and pies older than the server. It was supposed to be nostalgic. Instead, it became the most terrifying night of my life. It began around dusk. We were deep in the mountains of North Carolina, winding through one of those two-lane roads that snakes along the ridges and dips like a roller coaster. There was almost no traffic, which was perfect. The sun was painting the clouds in blood-orange streaks, and our windows were down, letting in the crisp evening air scented with pine and dew. We hadn't seen a building in nearly 40 minutes when we came across a small, cracked sign on the side of the road. Toll road, scenic overlook access, $1 fee. I smiled. Hey, remember this place? My wife leaned forward, squinting. Is this that detour we took by accident that one time? Yep. Ended up being the best view of the whole trip. I remember it. Let's do it. I took the turn. The road narrowed into a tight, winding path flanked by dense woods. The trees pressed in closer, and the light dimmed quickly as we drove deeper into the forested hills. My headlights cast long shadows through the branches, and the pavement turned rougher, older, faded, pitted with cracks. A minute or two later, we reached a small structure. It was a toll booth. A squat, concrete box with a striped arm lowered across the road. The booth had no windows, just a slit where you would presumably put your dollar, and a faded sign that read, "Exact change only, $1." There were no lights on inside. No attendant. No camera. Nothing. It was just there, sitting silent and still beneath a wooden canopy. The air around us felt strangely still. No wind. No chirping insects. No rustling of animals. Just the low hum of the engine. Creepy, my wife muttered. Was it always like this? I don't think so, I said. There was a guy in the booth last time. I dug into the glove box and found a crumpled dollar bill. I rolled down my window, leaned out, and shoved it through the slot. After a few seconds, the arm creaked and slowly lifted. We drove on. The overlook was supposed to be just a few miles beyond the toll. I remembered the path curving around a rock face and then opening into a clearing with a railing and a wide, breathtaking view of the valley below. But 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. No overlook, no clearing, just forest. And then another toll booth, identical to the first. Same concrete block, same striped arm, same sign, exact change only, $1. Wait, what? My wife said. My hands gripped the wheel a little tighter. I glanced in the mirror. Nothing behind us but darkness. You think we turned around by accident? I asked. I didn't make a U-turn. She shook her head. You didn't. We've been going forward the whole time. I drove up to the booth again. Sure enough, it looked exactly the same. I mean that literally, not just similar. The same smudge on the sign. The same faded blue sticker in the corner of the arm. The same slit for payment. There was still no attendant. I put another dollar in. The arm lifted. We passed through. The forest thickened. The road narrowed. We were both silent now. I turned the music off completely. The second toll booth had rattled us. But we kept going because what else were we going to do? We figured we'd missed the overlook somehow, and this was just the same road looping back to the highway. But after another 10 minutes of driving, we came upon the toll booth again. Same booth. Same everything. No way, I whispered. I parked this time. Got out of the car. The forest around us was deathly quiet. I walked over to the booth and ran my fingers along the cement. It was cold to the touch. Real. Solid. I even tried knocking on it. No answer. No sound. No one inside. I turned and looked down the road behind us, then down the road ahead. They were the same. Exactly the same. We were stuck in a loop. We drove through it again. And again. For times. 5. My wife cried the third time. She begged me to turn around. So I did. I spun the car around, even though the road was narrow and winding, and it took me 5 full minutes to get facing the other direction. We drove back. Every curve of the road mirrored the ones we just passed. But at the end, The toll booth again. We tried turning around at the booth, driving slowly, driving fast, honking, waiting, stopping, reversing. Nothing changed. Every time, the booth appeared again. I started to feel lightheaded. My hands were trembling. My wife said, "We're not leaving, are we?" I didn't answer. The seventh time we approached the booth, the slit had changed. Now, in addition to exact change only, another note had been scrawled beneath it in red marker. "You're short. Pay what's owed." "What does that mean?" she whispered. "I don't know. I paid each time." I checked my wallet. I only had $1 left. I shoved it through. This time, the arm didn't lift. A beat passed, then another, then a new sound. A deep, rumbling creak echoed from within the booth. The slit slid shut, and a second slot opened below it, larger, rougher, like it had been carved in with a knife. Above it, scratched into the concrete. "Pay in flesh." "What the hell does that mean?" my wife sobbed. I didn't answer, because I didn't know, and I didn't want to find out. That's when the lights went out. Not just the booth, everything. The headlights, the dashboard, the cabin lights. The forest plunged into darkness, and from somewhere beyond the trees, we heard something approaching. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, wet, dragging. We didn't wait to see what it was. I floored the gas, even though the barrier arm was still down. We plowed through it, splintering it like matchsticks, and the car bucked as we shot forward into the black. I don't know how long we drove. It felt like hours. Eventually, the trees thinned. The road widened. The world began to resemble itself again. And then, like flipping a switch, our headlights blinked back on. We passed a green road sign. Highway 441, Asheville, 15 miles. We made it to a motel and spent the night in stunned silence. The next morning, I tried to find the road again on a map, but there was nothing. No detour, no toll road, no scenic overlook. It was like it had never existed. We don't take road trips anymore. Not together. Not alone. Because somewhere in those woods, there's a road that loops. A booth that always demands one more payment. And something behind the trees that's still waiting to collect. My brother and I weren't what you'd call close. Not for lack of love, but we just lived different lives. I stayed in the city, desk job, bills, commutes. He lived more like Dad had, off the grid, always chasing the horizon. We only really saw each other at family holidays, and even those were starting to feel more like obligations than traditions. But when Dad passed away, something changed between us. He'd been the one thread connecting us both, and suddenly that thread was gone. So when my brother suggested we take a trip, one last drive for Dad, he said, I agreed. It felt right. Like something we were supposed to do. He wanted to drive from Texas down through Mexico to the small village where Dad had been born. A quiet place called San Isidro nestled deep in the hills, barely a speck on the map. He hadn't been back since he was a kid. Neither had we. We figured we'd drive there in 2 days, maybe 3, drop off some of Dad's ashes, pay our respects, and drive back. Easy. It wasn't. The first day was beautiful. Endless sky. Open roads. The kind of scenery that makes you forget the noise of your everyday life. We crossed the border at Del Rio and headed south, the road thinning out the farther we went. Cell reception dropped to 0 within a few hours, but we didn't mind. We had music, snacks, and the kind of quiet only the desert can offer. We spent that first night in a dusty roadside motel where the power flickered if you flushed too hard. It was perfect. Felt like Dad would have loved it. The next morning, we woke early and hit the road again. That's when everything went wrong. About 80 miles outside of San Isidro, in the middle of absolute nowhere, the car died. No warning lights. No rattling. Just a sudden, silent death. The engine cut out mid-conversation and wouldn't start again. My brother tried everything. He popped the hood, checked fuses, cables, fluid levels. He had always been more mechanically inclined than me, so I let him work while I sat on the trunk, sipping warm water and staring out into the emptiness. The sun was brutal. The nearest town, if you could even call it that, was behind us, nearly 2 hours away. No shade. No gas stations. No passing cars. No signal. We were completely alone. An hour passed. Then 2. The water started to run low. My brother cursed under his breath and slammed the hood shut. I don't get it, he said. There's no reason it should have stopped. I offered to walk, but he stopped me. No way. If something happens, we're both screwed. The sun climbed higher. We took turns sitting in the car, trying to conserve energy. I could feel the heat baking the roof above my head. My tongue was dry, lips cracking. It wasn't panic, not yet, but the fear was coiling at the edge of it. The kind of fear that grows when you realize how small you are in the face of the desert. By late afternoon, we had no water left. The air shimmered with heat mirages. I was seeing things, tiny dots on the horizon that never got closer, shadows under rocks that seemed to shift. Then, from far down the road, something moved. A figure, walking. At first, I thought it was a mirage, but it kept getting closer, step by step. An old man, hunched under the weight of a bag slung over his shoulder, with skin like leather and a straw hat pulled low over his eyes. He walked straight toward us without hesitation, as if he had known we were there. "Buenas tardes," he said as he approached, voice cracked like dry earth. My brother stood up cautiously. "Hola." The man pointed at the car. "Problemas." "Sí. No funciona." "Muerto." The old man nodded. He walked slowly around the car, I scanning every inch. Then he opened his bag and pulled out a bottle of water. Wordlessly, he handed it to us. We didn't ask questions. I took a sip first, barely able to stop myself from chugging the whole thing. The old man motioned for us to follow. He didn't speak again, just turned and began walking off the road, into the desert scrub. My brother and I exchanged a look. It wasn't smart. We both knew that. But we also knew we'd die out there if we didn't get help. So we followed. He led us for nearly 30 minutes. Through the brush, across dry creek beds, past sun-bleached cattle skulls half buried in dust. The terrain looked the same in every direction. I don't think we could have found our way back if we tried. Then, ahead, we saw it. A shack, small, crooked, made of old wood and corrugated metal, nestled into a small hill. Smoke curled faintly from a chimney, though we hadn't seen a fire on the way in. He led us inside. It was dark, but cool. Mercifully cool. Inside, a cot, a table, a few tools. A jug of water sat on a stool beside the cot. He motioned to it, and we drank more this time. Enough to bring some life back to our limbs. Then he pointed to the door and said only 2 words. "No salgon. Don't go out." Then he walked out into the dusk, leaving us alone in the shack. We stayed inside. Night fell quickly, but something about that shack didn't feel right. There were no lights, no pictures, no noise. The only thing inside besides us was an old wooden carving on the wall of a man standing alone in the desert, holding a staff, with strange figures crawling behind him in the dirt. My brother tried the radio again. Still dead. I asked him, "You think he's coming back?" He didn't answer, just stared at the door. Sometime after midnight, I woke to a sound. Whispers, like someone speaking just outside the walls. I sat up slowly. My brother was already awake, finger to his lips. We both heard it. Low voices. Many of them. But when I looked out the tiny window, there was no one. Only darkness. And shapes moving beyond the reach of moonlight. I didn't sleep after that. By dawn, the old man returned. He had a jug of water and a long, coiled rope over his shoulder. He led us back. But when we reached the road, the car was gone. Just gone. No tracks. No broken glass. No sign it had ever been there. My brother asked in halting Spanish where it went. The old man didn't answer. He pointed north, back toward town. Then he walked away. We eventually made it to a mechanic shop by hitching with a passing produce truck. We called the authorities. They found nothing where we said we'd broken down. No car. No marks. No shack. No sign of the old man. We searched for days, but there was nothing. To this day, I don't know if that man was real, or a ghost, or something older than either. But I know this. If he hadn't come when he did, my brother would have died out there. I was already half gone. He gave me water. But my brother, he gave him something else. He won't talk about it. Not even now. But I see it in his eyes when he stares into the desert. Like something out there is still calling him. Like the road never really let him go. There were 4 of us on that trip. Me, my girlfriend at the time, and our 2 closest friends. We were all in college, riding the high of finishing finals and needing to escape the campus grind. We planned a 2-week road trip from Illinois down to Florida, cutting through Kentucky and Tennessee along the way. It wasn't supposed to be anything spooky. No haunted detours. No roadside urban legends. Just beaches, beer, and playlists filled with nostalgic songs that made us feel like we were invincible again. But somewhere on that stretch of Southern Highway, something followed us. And even now, years later, I don't know what it wanted, or how long it had been watching us before we noticed. It started small, so small that none of us said anything at first. The first night, we stopped at a motel in rural Tennessee. It wasn't the kind of place you'd book online. It just existed, clinging to the edge of a two-lane highway like a bug on a windshield. We pulled in because it was late, we were tired, and there was nowhere else for another 50 miles. The motel lobby smelled like wet carpet. The walls were yellowed with age. The desk clerk handed us 2 keys without looking up from his crossword. As we carried our bags in, I noticed a man sitting alone in one of the old armchairs near the vending machine. He wasn't eating. He wasn't drinking. Just staring. Middle-aged, maybe late 40s. Pale skin, balding on top. Wore a plaid button-down tucked into jeans that were just a little too short. His eyes didn't move as we walked past. Not once. I didn't say anything. Neither did anyone else. The next morning, we hit the road early. We didn't talk about the guy in the lobby. Honestly, I think we all just assumed he was a late-night regular. Maybe a trucker passing through or some lonely soul with nowhere else to go. The day passed uneventfully. We laughed, sang along to dumb songs, and argued over whether Waffle House was better than IHOP. Waffle House always wins, by the way. That night, we found a hotel just outside Birmingham. Much nicer this time. Big lobby, real staff, functioning AC. We checked in, split up into our rooms, and passed out. The next morning, as we were packing the car, I saw him again. The same man, standing just across the parking lot, leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets, staring. My breath caught for a moment. I nudged my girlfriend. "Do you see that guy?" She glanced over. "Who?" "That guy in the plaid shirt. Same guy from the motel last night." She looked again, then frowned. "Oh, weird." We didn't say much more about it. What were we supposed to do? It was probably just coincidence. Maybe he was headed south too. That's what we told ourselves. But then it kept happening. We stopped for gas outside Montgomery. As we walked into the store to grab drinks, he was there, standing near the magazine rack, thumbing through a copy of Field and Stream, but not actually flipping the pages. Just standing, staring. I caught his eyes for a split second, and it was like slamming into a wall of ice. No recognition, no warmth, just blank focus. Like I was the one being read now. That's when I spoke up. I told the others, "He's following us." They laughed at first. "The guy from the motel? Come on, it's probably just a look-alike." "No," I said. "It's him. Same shirt, same shoes, same face." But what really hit me, what twisted in my gut like a knife, was that his car was nowhere in sight. How was he getting ahead of us? We tried to brush it off. The next day, we changed our route completely, skipping the coastal road and cutting inland. We drove hard, not stopping except for food and gas. No hotels that night. We slept in shifts, rotating drivers, trying to put distance between us and whatever this was. By the time we reached the Florida border, we hadn't seen him in 2 full days. Relief settled in like a blanket. We hit Daytona Beach, checked into a huge beachfront hotel, and let ourselves believe we were finally free of him. We spent the day in the ocean, drank on the boardwalk, and even laughed about it that night. "Remember our stalker?" One of us joked. "Bet he's still reading Field and Stream in Alabama." We were wrong. That night, just after 2 a.m., my girlfriend shook me awake. "Don't freak out," she whispered. "But he's here." I sat up in bed, heart racing. She pointed through the sheer hotel curtains toward the parking lot below. I pulled them open slowly and looked out. There he was, standing beneath the street lamp. Same plaid shirt, same stiff posture, same cold, fixed stare. Looking up, straight at our window. My knees buckled. We weren't on the first floor. He had to know which room was ours. I yanked the curtain shut and turned on every light in the room. We called security. By the time they checked the lot, he was gone. We packed up the next morning. Didn't even check out. We just left. Drove all the way home in one brutal stretch. No hotels. No stops except to gas up. None of us spoke much. We were too exhausted, too scared, and maybe too embarrassed to admit how shaken we were. When we finally reached home, I thought it was over. Weeks passed. No sign of him. No sightings. We scattered to our apartments and dorms, buried ourselves in routine. But then one night, I was flipping channels with the TV on mute when I stopped on a news story. They were talking about a man who'd gone missing 2 states over. They showed a photo, grainy, blown up from a security cam. It was him. Same plaid shirt. Same pale, drawn face. missing since 6 months before our trip. I don't have answers. I don't know who he was, or what he was. I don't know if we passed through some place we shouldn't have, or if something latched onto us when we weren't paying attention. But I do know this. He was never trying to get closer. He was always just close enough. Watching. And even now, whenever I see a plaid shirt or a man standing still beneath a parking lot light, my stomach twists in fear. Because maybe he wasn't trying to hurt us. Maybe he just wanted us to see him, to remember him, to never forget that he's still out there. There's a saying among truckers that goes something like this. The road is only as lonely as your last stop. We live our lives in motion, always headed somewhere, always arriving late and leaving early. Most nights are routine, boring, even. But every now and then, the road gives you something you didn't ask for. And once in a while, it gives you something that doesn't want you to leave. It was early spring, maybe late March, when this happened. I was on a solo run, hauling general freight out of Little Rock, Arkansas, bound for Jackson, Mississippi. Not a complicated trip by any means. Just a couple 100 miles of flat, quiet highway. The job came through late in the day, so I didn't get moving until after dark. That wasn't unusual for me. I actually prefer driving nights. Fewer cars, fewer distractions. The road feels emptier, calmer. Sometimes you can go for an hour without seeing another set of headlights. But there's a trade-off for that peace. Because when something goes wrong at night, you're alone. Around 2:30 in the morning, I decided to stop. There's a rest area just off I-530, about 90 minutes south of Little Rock. I'd pulled in there once or twice before, small place, barely lit, nothing but a brick bathroom building, some concrete truck spots, and a few weathered picnic tables. It wasn't the kind of stop you'd choose for comfort. But I'd been on the road for close to 8 hours with only one real break, and the fatigue was starting to hit hard. I needed to catch at least an hour or two of sleep before I made the final push to Jackson. As I pulled into the lot, I saw there was one other truck already parked near the back. No lights on. Engine off. Looked like the driver was already asleep. I took a spot a few rows down, far enough to avoid crowding him, but close enough that I wouldn't feel like I was parking on the moon. The rest stop was dead quiet. Even the trees around the lot seemed unnaturally still, their branches frozen mid-motion like they were holding their breath. The one working street lamp above me flickered every few seconds, just enough to make shadows jump. I parked, killed the engine, and cracked the driver's side window to let some air in. The air was cool but carried that wet, earthy smell of oncoming rain. I reclined my seat and pulled the curtain shut behind me, plunging the cab into a soft darkness. Sleep came quickly. I don't know what woke me. I didn't hear anything, no loud bang, no honking. It was more like a feeling. The kind that makes the hair on your arms rise before your brain even knows why. I opened my eyes. The cab was still dark. The lot was silent. Then, from the corner of my vision, I noticed something strange in the mirror. A shape. At first, I thought it was the shadow of a tree or a reflection from a passing car. But there were no headlights, and the shape wasn't swaying like it should have if it was cast by wind. It was a man, standing still about 10 feet from my passenger side door. I sat up slowly, careful not to rustle anything. The seat creaked just slightly, and I winced. The man didn't move. He was tall, maybe 6 feet 2 inches, wearing a long coat that brushed against his boots. He stood at an angle, not looking at me directly, but slightly to the side, like he was listening. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets. His face was in shadow. I watched him for what felt like minutes. My breath caught every time he shifted his weight. Then he took a step forward. I froze. He moved with deliberate slowness, one foot in front of the other, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping animal. When he reached the passenger door, he paused. Then tap. A single, soft knock on the window. I didn't move. Tap. Tap. Another 2 knocks. Just as soft. I reached down toward the floor, feeling for the small flashlight I kept near my boots. My fingers brushed against it just as he crouched, slowly, silently, until I could no longer see him through the window. Now he was below the line of sight. I couldn't see him, but I could still feel him there. The silence was deafening. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. Then I heard it. The faint sound of gravel shifting beneath his feet. The scrape of a boot turning. He was moving around the front of the truck. I darted forward, lifting the curtain a few inches so I could watch through the windshield. He passed beneath the flickering lamp, and for a brief moment, I saw him clearly. He had no expression. Just a long, pale face, eyes open too wide, staring at the hood of the truck like he was memorizing every inch of it. He walked to the driver's side. I locked the door. Not that it wasn't already locked, but I needed to hear the click. He paused again, raised one hand, and ran his fingers slowly across the side of the cab. SCRRK, like fingernails on metal. Not scratching, just feeling. Then, just like that, he turned and walked away, back into the shadows. No running, no looking back. I waited until sunrise before moving again. When I finally climbed out of the cab, the lot looked normal. Too normal. I did a full walk around. There were faint smears on the passenger window, like palm prints. Greasy, partial, but no scratches. No sign he tried to break in. Just the memory of the sound, the feel of his stare. I walked over to the other truck, the one that had been there when I arrived. The cab was empty, windows fogged over, doors slightly ajar. Inside, the bed was still made. No signs of life. No keys. No phone. Just an empty cab and a half-drunk bottle of water in the cup holder. I didn't touch anything. Didn't even knock. I got in my rig, started the engine, and drove. Didn't stop until I hit a Flying J nearly 80 miles down the road. I told the story to a few other drivers that day. They nodded but didn't say much. One of them mentioned a rumor about a guy who walked rest stops at night. Never harmed anyone. Never broke in. Just stared. Knocked once or twice. Then vanished. Some say he was a trucker who died in his rig mid-route. Others say he's just a drifter who knows how to scare people without ever breaking the law. But me? I think he's something else. Something that waits in those empty rest areas where there's no Wi-Fi, no cameras, no one to hear you scream. I haven't slept in an unlit rest stop since. I'll take a gas station lot with screaming kids and too much light over that kind of silence any day. Because I know now. There are places the world forgot. And there are things still living there. Watching. Waiting. And sometimes, knocking. There's something about driving at night through rural America that feels otherworldly. Maybe it's the darkness, thicker out there than anywhere else. Or the way the road seems to stretch forever. No lights, no signs, just the hum of tires and the pale glow of your headlights slicing into the void. Either way, it's beautiful in the day. At night? Not so much. Especially when something steps out of that darkness. This happened about 4 years ago. I was on a cross-country road trip with my best friend, Evan. We were both in our 20s, college behind us, jobs lined up, but not started yet. That weird limbo space where you're too old to be reckless but too young to stop trying. We'd planned this trip as our last big freedom run, before adult life fully claimed us. No real schedule, just a route, coast to coast. A few friends to visit along the way. Camp if we could, sleep in the car if we had to, and crash in hotels when the budget allowed. On the third night, we were cutting through rural Pennsylvania. It was late, close to midnight. We were on a quiet two-lane highway that wove through a series of wooded hills. Not a car in sight, not for miles in either direction. Our phones had lost signal an hour earlier, and we'd missed the last turnoff for gas. But it was peaceful. Stars above. Classic rock playing softly. Evan was behind the wheel, and I was nodding off in the passenger seat. That's when it happened. He slammed on the brakes. I jolted upright, eyes wide, heart already hammering. What the hell? Did you see her? He asked, breathless. Who? A woman. She just walked into the road. I blinked and looked ahead. Nothing but empty highway illuminated in the beams. I didn't see anything, I said, still trying to shake the sleep from my brain. Evan was pale, knuckles white on the steering wheel. She was right there. She was barefoot, wearing this old white nightgown or dress or something. Are you sure it wasn't an animal? No, man. She looked right at me. We sat there for a moment, engine idling, both scanning the darkness. The woods on either side were thick and close to the road. If someone had walked into our path, they could have slipped into the trees before I woke up. Should we go back? I asked hesitantly. Evan didn't answer right away. He finally shook his head. No, I don't want to see her again. We kept driving. Slower this time. The air in the car felt heavier. Every shadow outside the window seemed to stretch and sway, and the trees leaned a little too close to the road. I turned the music down, almost instinctively, like we needed to hear the night better. 15 minutes later, we reached a small clearing where the forest opened up for a stretch. That's when I saw her. This time it was me who saw her first. She was standing on the right side of the road, near the edge of the tree line. Just standing there. A woman. Barefoot. wearing a white nightgown that looked yellowed and worn, like it had been dragged through dirt and rain. Her hair was long and dark, falling in wet strands over her shoulders. She didn't move, didn't raise a hand, just watched us pass. But here's the thing. As we drove by, she turned her head to follow us. Slowly, her eyes locked with mine through the glass. No emotion, no fear, just stillness. And then she smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not a thank you for not hitting me smile. It was wide. Too wide. Like a grin pulled too far on skin too tight. Did you? I started. I saw her, Evan said, his voice thin. Neither of us said anything for a while. We drove another half hour before we saw the sign for a rest stop. It was one of those old state-run ones, just a parking loop and some picnic tables. We debated pulling over, but the tension in the car was getting unbearable. We needed to breathe. Think. The lot was empty. We parked under one of the flickering sodium lights and got out. The air was cooler, and the night was quiet. Evan lit a cigarette and paced. What the hell was that? I didn't have an answer. I leaned against the hood, arms crossed, trying to process the look on her face. That smile. Then we heard it. Footsteps. On gravel. Approaching from the tree lane. Both of us turned at the same time. Nothing. The forest edge was maybe 50 feet away. Dense. Black. Then, a shape. Moving just inside the trees. Thin. Pale. Steady. I think it's her, Evan whispered. We both backed toward the car. The sound of footsteps stopped. We waited. Then, from the woods, a scream. Shrill. Human. Piercing the night like a blade. But the worst part? It wasn't in pain. It was angry. Hungry. Like something feral in human skin. We didn't wait to see more. We got in the car and peeled out of that lot like hell was on our heels. We didn't stop until we hit a town 2 hours away. Found a motel with a night clerk and enough exterior lighting to feel like daylight. Neither of us slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. Standing in the road. Watching. Smiling. The next morning, we tried to look it up. Some kind of local legend, maybe. A woman hit by a car and haunting the road. Classic urban legend stuff. We found nothing. No missing persons. No ghost stories. No legends. Just a forgotten stretch of highway and a pair of shaken men with no explanation. To this day, I don't know what we saw. But I know this. She wasn't lost. She wasn't hurt. She was hunting. And that smile? That was her way of letting us know we'd been chosen. That she'd seen us. And maybe she still does.